My opponent has an unfortunate pattern of doing things first, denying them, and later apologizing for them. In 1993, he apologized to 600 targets of spying at the Warren and Erie, Pennsylvania malls. He suggested the program, as was reported by the Post-Journal.
I've been accused on a radio ad and today of convincing the state tax department to engage in tax spying. We got a newspaper article in this paper on January 15th, 1973. Had a statement by the Commissioner of Taxation that said that is absolutely not true. What the Commissioner said is the state tax department, not Goodell, made the decision to proceed. And he went on to say that the state tax department does not take its direction from local officials. And so to suggest that they are is a flat-out lie. And you should be ashamed of yourself, Nancy. I know the Post-Journal has copies of some articles. And on the tax buying issue, the Commissioner of Taxation is the one that said, quote, "We accept responsibility for our actions." And the Post-Journal, based on a personal interview at the time, which was 17 years ago, went on to say that the Commissioner said the tax department, not Goodell, decided to implement. So to run ads to say that I convinced them to do this, and saying that over and over, and then to go on to say that and make those allegations is just flat out wrong.
The newspaper said you suggested it, and you don't deny suggesting it.
No, I have never denied suggesting an informational program advising people what the current law was. That's not what they did. And to suggest I convinced them to do something else is just flat out wrong. It's flat out wrong.
I didn't say
and there's
convinced.
No excuse for it.
Where did I say convinced?
You said it twice.
Where?
In a radio announcement. And if you'd like,
not...
I'd be glad to play it for you.
Okay.
Secret agent is, it'd be funny if it was a joke, but it really happened right here in Chicago County. County Executive Andy Goodell visits the state tax department to track down families at the Pennsylvania Mall.
That's twice.
Stalking and tracking our license plate just for trying to save a few bucks in sales tax. Pretty sneaky, huh? And when he got caught, he denied it. You're still right. And when he was caught denying it, well, then finally admitted it. Now Andy Goodell wants to be our offender. He said he's going to change Albany. I heard it. Not telling the truth.
Not telling the truth.
Finally got caught.
But you did deny it.
Andy Goodell will fit right.
You did deny it.
I denied recommending what they did, and I still deny it, and I have never, ever admitted that I recommended what they did. I recommended, or I discussed with them, I didn't recommend it, I discussed with them an informational program. And to say I convinced them to do it when the state tax commissioner himself said that's not true is a negative campaign that's just not true. It's not correct, it's not true, it's factually not wrong.
You have one
And it
article,
violates our Rotary Code. First rule, remember, there's four rules. First one, is it true? The answer is no. Is it fair to all concerned? No. Is it beneficial? No, it's not. It's negative campaigning. It's the worst type of negative campaigning, and you should be ashamed of it, Nancy. You're above that.
There's more than one article.
This is the commissioner of the taxation department himself saying it's not true.
There's another headline, and you know there's another headline,
but
and it's not that one.
This is the commissioner himself saying we didn't do it.
I do not. I don't want to be a negative campaigner, but we are both wanting something very badly, and the public record is part of. It's what we're running on, the public record of where we are and judgments and issues. And believe me, my byline isn't on these things. It's not what I wrote, it's what other people wrote.
Oh, by the way, I didn't play the end of it, where it says,
The Lance and Nancy Bargar paid for this ad because nothing will change in Albany unless we vote for change.
Nancy, your byline is on.
No, the article. I said my byline is not on any of these newspaper articles. That's not a byline.
I love it when someone says, I don't want to do a negative campaign, but.
I'll take the but out. I don't think it's a negative campaign. Everybody I've talked to, in fact, as we got ready to
most assuredly, it's not a positive, issue-oriented campaign about what you can do, Nancy.
That wasn't
It's all
the question.
designed
The
for one
question,
purpose, which is
Andrew,
to attack my
the question
character.
is, why is your opponent not as qualified? That's the question. They didn't ask me,
This
Nancy,
ad-
why are you qualified?
This ad has only one purpose, which is to attack my character, and it's doing it in a way that violates all 4 rules of Rotary.
It isn't your character. It's a fact that
So saying that he doesn't tell the truth doesn't attack my character?
you denied it. What? I mean, it's the same thing with my domain name.
No,
You denied
I've always been honest.
Well, I don't think you've been transparent. I don't think so. My opponent has taken one position against the excesses of special interests, on the one hand. On the other hand, he appears to have participated in this very activity by virtue of evidence, and we're talking about appearances. My opponent has not told the public about his lobbying. I want to juxtapose his position on lobbying with his practice as a lobbyist. Is this why he's talking about cleaning up Albany? Because he has been a lobbyist.
With regard to lobbying, I am an attorney and I represent a lot of clients. And if I have a client that's working with the state, as I have from time to time, I am required by law to become a registered lobbyist. That doesn't mean I run a lobbying firm out of Jamestown, New York. It means I register as a lobbyist and I comply with all the lobbying requirement acts whenever I represent a client. In 1998, I was appointed as a compliance monitor at Vernon Downs. My job was to bring the facility into compliance with all the regulations, and I was approved as an independent compliance monitor by a vote of the Racing and Wagering Board. And I did bring them into compliance. And at the end of my job there, they were in full compliance. In 2002, I served as an interim president for 6 months while my clients became licensed. I obviously was easily licensed because of my background. And I performed it, and they ran it. In 2006, I represented an Australian consortium that submitted a $1.8 billion bid to the state of New York to take over their 3 racetracks and related facilities. It was a great job. I was honored and pleased to represent them. The problem isn't that the state has lobbyists. That's not the problem. Lobbyists serve a valuable function by bringing in information in front of legislators, making sure they have the facts, the arguments and counter-arguments on different proposals. The problem with lobbying is when you put the finances on it and lobbyists use campaign contributions in an effort to buy votes. And that's a major ethical issue that we'll be addressing shortly.
He has just made a reference to when he sees something wrong and violating the law, he wouldn't hesitate to go after that corruption. And I think that's fine. But I think that's a clear reference to the lawsuit that named me to take issue with what was happening at the Board of Elections before I became a candidate of the Independence Party line, before I became a candidate of any line. And while he has apologized for naming me, the fact is he did name me. And my legal bills have come to about $5,000 for this. It's a distraction. It's been a distraction. And in the end, it accomplished one thing that I can tell. One thing was accomplished. I was thrown off that line. And that was the goal in my mind. If the real mission of his lawsuit was to change something about the Board of Elections, I don't think he's taken it far enough. Because I don't see how that has happened as a result of the initiating of this.
When you bring in a lawsuit that affects somebody else, even if they're just affected, you have to name them as a courtesy, not only as a matter of law, but as a matter of courtesy. I named Nancy Bargar in a lawsuit against Norm Green, not because I'm suing Nancy Bargar, but because she has the right to know about what's going on in a lawsuit that might affect her. She had no legal obligation to do anything. I encouraged her to renunciate and denounce what Norm Green was doing.
Lawsuit not to get legal counsel? Would you encourage
No.
someone?
What I encourage you to do is look at the facts and can come to the same conclusion that I did, that Norm Green was violating the law, was engaged in underhanded, unsavory transactions, and I encourage you to join me in denouncing it. Instead, you spent
named me in a lawsuit, and you want
$5,000.
me to come over to your side after you've named me in a lawsuit?
I have to name.
You did
If
not.
you were
No,
even on the same side.
Listen,
Oh, no,
you didn't
no,
have
no.
to name me, except that you wanted one thing,
No,
which
no.
was the
I
Independence
have to
Party
name.
vote is very important in this election, and you know that.
You cannot challenge Norm Green's actions on the Independence Declaration
Why did you
without
have to-
naming everyone who might be affected.
This is unprecedented, and you know that no
Well,
case...
it's required by law.
No, but it's unprecedented that someone has lost a line under these circumstances. Thomas DiNapoli, the Nassau County executive, had a similar case. He didn't lose the line. This is the first time that the line has been lost under these circumstances. And so, you know, there was a lot at stake there.
It is, first of all, it is not the first time.
Where's
There's
the
another
other time?
case
Cite another
involving
case.
a guy named Pasquarelli. Almost identical facts. A declination was submitted. It sat on the desk of an election commissioner for 6 days, and the court threw it out as not being timely filed. We cited that, by the way, in our brief. We not only cited it, we quoted it extensively. It was an entire half page in our legal brief. Nancy's lawyer comes back and says, there's no such case. I don't know what he was reading, because obviously he wasn't reading our legal brief. But here's the bottom line. Nancy spent $5,000. Why? So she could benefit from the illegal actions of Norm Green. The appellate division unanimously held that he violated multiple sections of the election law.
The first time the law or was considered here in Mayville, it was dismissed, and you know that. It was on your appeal.
Right? It went up. The appellate division sent it back for a full hearing, and once all the facts were on the table, not only the original judge reversed himself, but the appellate division unanimously affirmed. And, Nancy didn't have to spend any money. She didn't have to defend it. It wasn't against her. It was about... But apparently, this is a theory we're apparently hearing. It's too bad that Norm Green may have committed a felony, because it's a felony
If
for a
it's a
public
felony,
official.
then why didn't you take it to criminal court? If you felt that this was something high, that rose to the level of crime,
I'll address it in
why
just a
didn't you
moment.
take it to criminal court?
So, the election law makes it a felony for a public official to hinder or delay the performance of any act required by the election law, which is precisely what Norm Green did. And so, if you take the position that I'm only going to fight corruption as long as it doesn't benefit me, then you'll fit right in Albany, because that's exactly the problem we have with all the lobbyists and the pay-to-play routine and all the scandal that's going on in Albany. With regard to the criminal charges, I, as an individual, cannot file criminal charges. They go through the district attorney's office. What I can do, and what I did do, is immediately challenge Norm Green's illegal activity. I immediately got it into court so that the court could rule. We eventually had the full hearing. Now, do I think Norm Green's action should be investigated by the district attorney? Of course. And I'm sure that will happen in due course.
My opponent has consistently talked about his superior work in the area of keeping his own fiscal house while he was county executive in Mayville. And I want to stress that I, as a county legislator, not only was on the finance committee all 10 years that I was there, but I was the only Democrat on the Budget Watch subcommittee, and that I was just as close as I could be as a lawmaker to the budget as he was creating the budget in the first place. And I give him credit, but I give him credit for creating a fund balance that was, on the one hand, admirable. On the other hand, the auditors called it into question as almost being irresponsibly hoarding the taxpayers' money at that time. And the Democrats had a platform of debt reduction, et cetera, which I have in my possession to demonstrate that we felt that the taxpayers shouldn't have been giving forth quite so much money, even in those boom times, and those were different times. It's great to say that you create a fund balance of that size in the 90s, but this isn't the 90s.